All right, everybody, welcome back to another Hive in session. I'm your host, as always, Ben, and I'm really pleased to be joined by Mark Crabtree today. Mark, thank you very much for coming on with me.
You're welcome. Nice to see you.
My pleasure. So, do you want to? I'll tell you what, Mark. Do you want to give us a quick run through of who you are and what you do?
Yeah. So I'm Mark Crabtree. I was at Durham University until October 2018, where I was assistant HR director responsible for leadership and organization development. But since April 2019, I've been running my own consultancy, which specializes in leadership, organization development. But I guess I'm interested in change and transformation, about how to support people through change and transformation. So that's the bit that really interests me and gets me up in the morning, I guess.
Excellent, and I think it's a thing that you have in common with a lot of people who will be watching this series, and people who generally come to have a chat with Hive and have a look at some of our content. So I understand you're going to be talking to us about kind of more transformational HR today, Mark, and sort of what you're calling the 4Rs.
Yeah, the 4Rs is something I've been thinking about for a little while, and I guess it's really coming to its own due to the pandemic, and when people start talking about getting ready for the new normal, although I'm not sure what's going to be normal, to be perfectly honest. And I guess the kind of thing that I'm interested in is creating space for people to really think about how they need to pivot, change their ways of working or their strategies, based on their experiences. Because I think it's very easy for people to say, okay, we're coming out of lockdown and we're going to open businesses and we'll just go to back to the way it was before. But I'm not sure that's the right thing to do. I think we've got to really sit back and reflect and learn. So yeah, I came up with the 4Rs, which stands for reflect, review, reconnect, and reboot. So reflect, review, reconnect, and reboot. So those are the things that I'm actually interested in.
I think that it's a really interesting topic, and it's certainly, I can't think of a better time really for it, in the sense that going back to the back to normal, or even, as you say, Mark, kind of the idea of this new normal, it does seem, certainly from my perspective, it seems to be a little bit kind of fanciful. I think the idea that people are just going to fall back into doing things the way that they had been. It's funny. I've got a bit of I've got a bet on with my dad. His attitude is that sort of post vaccinations, and assuming everything goes as well as everyone's hoping it does, he thinks that there's just sort of too much infrastructure for us to kind of want to change and go back to any and kind of approach it a different way. He's kind of, we'll all be back in offices by October, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. And I'm sitting there thinking, too many people have seen the other side of it for the genie to go back in the bottle. In my mind, I think that, I think the commute, people talk about the commute a lot. I think that will probably be quite a big nail in the coffin for, people not wanting to go back to the way things were, because it's time that you're missing out on with your family, or time for yourself in the form of morning exercise or whatever. And I think that, part of what you're talking about is this kind of this, I mean, I'm sure you're going to take the stages kind of one by one, but certainly in terms of this reflect and review, I mean, I think when people reflect on the amount of hours that they've spent in a little metal box going down a motorway just to go to somewhere that they've just, they just had to be for 8 hours, never questioned why until recently. It surely even that period of reflection is going to give enough people the space to think, actually, there is a better way of doing this, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think, when we look at the world of work, I mean, I think it has changed. I mean, I think there are those who are really wanting to go back to the physical office because they miss those kind of incidental conversations, incidental learning. And we are social creatures. We want to mingle with people. But there are those who say, as you said, I don't miss the 2-hour commute. I don't miss driving down the motorway in that little metal box. I've actually got more time to spend with my friends, my family, my loved ones, do exercise. So I think it's this kind of blended approach. And I don't think we can really assume that one size fits all. But that's what the challenge is going to be. But there'll be those who say, I want to go back, and there are those who say, no, I want to stay where I am. And it's about how do we deal with all these different views and different expectations. But I think part of this is we've got to create space to have those conversations. We've got to create space to really learn from our experiences and also to hear about people's expectations going forward. And if we don't create that space, I think, conflict will rise in organizations. We're going to have lots of people feeling a little bit uncomfortable about the world of work. So I think the time is now to talk, even more than ever, about what do we want this world of work to be going forward.
I think that's absolutely right. And I mean, I suppose that the initial question that springs to mind there, Mark, is kind of what are some simple ways that, practitioners watching this or listening to this, as the case may be, can sort of start to facilitate conversations like this?
Yeah, I mean, shall I take you through the 4 R's? And I mean, because
yeah, please do.
So, I mean, I guess that the starting point for this was me thinking about, what are the main questions that are keeping leaders awake at night about their organization? What is the future looking like for them, and how are they going to pivot, adapt to move forward? So the 4 R's, as I said, it was reflect, review, reconnect, and reboot. So the reflect bit for me is we've got to understand and create space for that kind of deep reflection. And it's about hearing about what people have experienced over the last 12 months, or even longer than 12 months. And it's about creating that space and opportunities for people to have real deep conversations. So how have you experienced it? What's worked for you? What hasn't worked for you? What have you missed? What have you gained? How has this affected you in terms of a mental well-being perspective or a productivity perspective? So let's really create that kind of space to have those kind of reflective conversations. And I think, by doing that, we can start to really unpick people's experiences and start to really think about what their aspirations may be going forward. So the reflect bit is just creating that space and having those kind of conversations. And sometimes I think it's worthwhile having those conversations facilitated by somebody coming in and asking the naive question. And I think, the good thing about asking the naive question is, it's probably there in our minds anyway, but we don't feel able to say it. So somebody articulating that for you, I think is really important. But the review bit is then thinking, okay, so what do we need to keep? So what have we learned that we've really benefited from? So how do we keep that, or how do we adapt that to make sure we keep going with that new way of working going forward? What do we want to ditch? What's been really difficult? What have we really missed, and how can we get those things back? What has worked for us? What hasn't worked for us? What should we stop doing, and what should we start doing? And I guess it's about really reviewing that last 12 months based on that reflection to start to get a shopping list of the things that we want to keep and preserve going forward, or the things to say, what, that's really been at the heart of the way we've done work. We've got to try and get that back in some format. And it'll start to help us think about how we communicate, how we support, how we train, how we develop. And that, I think, is important, because we then need to think about, how do we reconnect? And I'm talking about reconnecting with all stakeholders here. And how do we reconnect with them? And it was funny, I was lucky enough to talk to a guy in Toronto a few months ago. And he was saying, look, there's his favorite restaurant that I used to go to. And he said it's been closed for a while because of the pandemic. And now it's opening up. And I'm saying, well, if you think about a restaurant, what you've got to really think about as that restaurant is, what is your restaurant about? Is it about fine food and fine dining and the real culinary experience? Or is it about, the space for conversations and relaxation and having a bit of a crack and, having a pizza with a mate or something? So if you really think about what your customers really want, if you're going back to this new way of operating where we perhaps have to social distance for a little while now, how are you going to, reboot your business without thinking about what your stakeholders and what your customers are really wanting? And let's have that kind of conversation and think about how we reboot our business. But before that, think about how we're going to reconnect. So reconnection for me is, how do we reconnect with our customers? How do we learn about their experiences, their aspirations, the things that they want? How do we reconnect with our suppliers? and think about things from their perspective. How do we do business with them? How do we reconnect with our employees, our managers, our staff, our colleagues? So I think it's about really thinking about that reconnection bit and really learning from other people's experiences. So if we can reflect, on our own experiences, if we can review and we can think about we can reconnect and how we can reconnect, the next thing is then we've got to reboot. We've got to reboot the business. Now, it's not a case of, turning it off and turning it back on again. What I mean by reboot is really sort of learning from this and melding your organization, shaping your organization so it's fit for the way forward. And, people talk about the new normal. I'm not sure it is going to be normal. I think it's going to be different. But let's celebrate that difference. But let's make sure that we build something that is purposeful, correct, and based on people's wants, needs, and experiences. So that's where the 4R bit came from. And, I just want people to have that deep reflection. And I just thought 4Rs, you can remember it. It's fairly easy, fairly straightforward. So that's
absolutely.
That's what it came about with, really.
Oh, no, as I say, I think that, now is the perfect time for businesses to be thinking like this. I mean, it's like I've kind of long been saying in kind of to people that I speak with, like, there isn't really any point in, going to your people with a strategy that you've come up with almost completely independently. We want to be crowdsourcing, the challenges and the opportunities and understanding how we can create, as I say, like a plan, a policy, a strategy, whatever it might be, that is going to kind of take into account what everybody's been, kind of individually as much as possible, but also collectively going through. I mean, the idea that, as an employee anyway, the idea that, I could come back to work for a business that's just going to try and act like the last 12 months hasn't happened. It just makes you feel like they're going to be completely out of touch with reality almost. And, the way that I quite see it most compellingly framed, or perhaps this is maybe a little bit more manipulative on the part of the people who are framing it in this way, is that kind of battle for talent. Like if you're an organization that isn't prepared to, offer somebody the flexibility that the last 12 months have maybe forced you to, or, you decide that it is going to be back to the office Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, for example, you do risk, losing people to, more, what's the word, kind of future facing organizations and things like that. So I think that there's lots of sort of opportunities for businesses, but equally, I would argue that, the potential challenges are quite real for them as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I was doing some writing early on this year, and it was just after the first lockdown, really. I'm saying, we've got to understand how people have experienced this, because there's those who were furloughed who didn't want to be furloughed, those who were working who wanted to be furloughed, those who are grieving and haven't been able to grieve properly. There's those who have developed habits. There's those who are balancing homeschooling with demanding jobs. And there's a whole range of people's experiences, and we've got to listen to their voices, and we've got to listen to things, that have really been impactful for them. And also, we've got to understand that, businesses have got to meet the needs of shareholders. They've got to meet the needs of their customers as well. But how do you balance that with the needs of all your stakeholders? It's really difficult. And, you read the news, and I was reading something over the weekend about, some call centers wanting to install cameras onto people's, laptops to watch them working. And you think, hang on a minute, what we've got to do here is we've got to be really, really careful. And the thing that I'm interested in is that I've done some stuff on mental health as well in the past 18 months. And I'm a real advocate of something called marking the boundaries. So what I mean by marking the boundaries is something that says you're no longer at work. You're now outside of work with your family, or you're doing things that you enjoy. And for some, that commute is a boundary. I've come across people in the past who said, when I was working at Durham, would say, we talk about work from Durham to the Angel of the North. And then from the Angel of the North onwards, we talk about things that are nothing to do with work. And then we do it completely opposite direction going away. But so the Angel of the North was that boundary. So that commute is really important. How do you do that working from home, especially when your working space is in your bedroom, where you've got that laptop winking at you during, the evening, thinking, God, did I send that email? And just go on. So I think we're just going to be really careful and think about those kind of things as well. So, it isn't one size fit all. And I think we've got to be aware of that and just not expect people to suddenly say, I can blend work and home together, because for me, it doesn't feel right. Now, that's my own personal experience. I'm lucky, I've got a room which is now my office. But the other things I do, and this sounds crazy, is that even though I've worked from home for the last, 2 years now, nearly, I've got clothes that I wear when I'm working and clothes that I wear when I'm not working. It's not a uniform as such, but so it's a boundary. It's something that says, look, you're no longer, driving your business.
Mm-hmm.
How do we create that space for people to, balance their needs and their wants and their work and everything? And I just think we've got to think carefully, and that's why, the reflection and the reviewing bit, is really important. Otherwise, we could be storing things up for the future. I don't think we know, and we won't know for many years, what impact these last 12 months have really had on us. I think that it's going to take a long time for everything to come out.
Totally agree. But and I agree with you, Mark. I think that the best place that we can all start is by having a real, for want of a better word, a real audit as to what the last 12 months has meant for for the people inside our organizations and for us, and kind of do that reflect period, and then review, and as you say, reconnect. Probably that's the one I'm looking forward to the most, and then we'll see what the reboot has in store. But
yeah, I mean, reconnect, I think, is really important. It's about how do we reconnect in an authentic way, and how do we do that? And I think absolutely. And, I think it is about having an audit, having a conversation, but let's give it some purpose. Let's give it some structure. So we really do learn from this. And we do create something that brings the best out of people and develops that talent and attracts talent. So I think that's really important.
100%. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we've got for this episode of Hive in Session. I'm hoping this is going to be perhaps a longer conversation that we get to have another time, Mark. But thank you so very much for joining me.
You're more than welcome. Really enjoyed it. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Excellent. And thank you for joining us, everybody. And we'll see you in the next one.